The sky was dark above the earth, clouds floating like silent ghosts. A silver spaceship moved slowly across the black sky, its lights blinking softly as it approached the quiet town below. Inside the ship sat Captain Ray, a human officer of the Galactic Patrol. His face cold and serious, his eyes reading the new mission on the screen in front of him. The order was simple: deport alien number 647. Found hiding in Sector 12, illegal presence on Earth. Possible danger, no questions asked. No delay, mission must be completed. Ray leaned back in his seat, his hand resting on the old photo in his pocket. A photo of his daughter who he had lost many years ago. Her smile still fresh in his mind, but orders were orders, and he had never broken them before the ship landed in a small colony at the edge of the city. The sun had just started to rise, painting the sky in soft red and orange. People were waking up slowly. Unaware of the silent visitor above, Ray stepped out of the ship, his boots making no sound on the ground. His scanner beeped quietly in his hand, showing the direction. The house was small, a little old, but clean and warm. There were flowers in front, a blue curtain in the window. Everything looked peaceful, but the scanner did not lie. The signal was strong. He walked up to the door, raised his hand, and pushed it open without knocking. The door creaked slightly, and inside he saw her, the alien mother. She stood still, frozen like a statue. Her skin was a soft silver blue, her hair long and dark, her eyes wide with fear. She held her arms out to protect something behind her. Ray raised his weapon slowly, his voice firm but calm. By Earth Order 113, you are to be deported immediately. You have no right to stay here. Step forward now. The alien mother did not move. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Then, from behind her, a small voice came. Soft and scared, please, don't take my mommy. Ray blinked. His eyes moved past the mother, and he saw her, a small alien girl, no more than 6 years old. Her eyes big and filled with tears. She held a toy in her tiny hands, her feet bare, her voice shaking. Please, mister, don't take her away. I promise we will be good. We won't hurt anyone. I promise. Ray lowered his weapon a little, just a little, his heart beating louder in his chest. This was not part of the mission. This was not in the file. There was no mention of a child. He looked at the mother again. She still stood still, but her eyes were shining now. Not with fear, but with something else, something like hope. The girl took a small step forward, then another. She walked right up to Ray and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold and soft. She looked up at him with those big glowing eyes. Please, she whispered again. Please don't take my mommy. Ray looked down at her. The room felt too quiet now, the world outside too far away. In that moment, he was not a soldier, not an officer, not even a human maybe, just a man standing in front of a child asking for mercy. He remembered his daughter's voice, the way she laughed, the way she cried when she was scared. The memory hit him hard, like a wave crashing into his chest. This girl was not a threat. She was just a child. The mother slowly stepped forward too, her voice soft like the wind. We only wanted safety. We ran from war. We had nowhere else to go. She is all I have. Please. Ray looked at them. The scanner still blinked red in his hand. The mission still active, the order still clear, but his heart was not so clear anymore. He turned away, walked to the window, looked outside at the rising sun, birds flying quietly across the sky. He took a deep breath. Then he turned back, looked at the child. Then the mother, his voice quiet. This never happened. I was never here. The mother gasped. The girl smiled a little, but Ray held up his hand. Go, now, before someone else comes. I can't stop them all. The mother grabbed the girl and ran through the back door, holding her close, her feet fast, her heart full of fear, but also something more. Ray stood alone in the room, the silence returning slowly. He looked at the toy the girl had dropped, picked it up, and held it in his hand. Then he sat down, stared at the door, and waited for the next sound, the next step, the next order, because he knew this was not the end. This was just the beginning. Rain. touched the window like soft fingers from the sky, and in a small hidden cave outside the colony, the alien mother held. Her daughter closed her eyes, watching the shadows dance across the wet ground, her heart still racing from the escape. Her breath quiet, but heavy, each second felt like 100 years, and each sound outside felt like danger calling. Her name was Lyra. Once a scientist on a far world, not shown on any human map. Her people were peaceful, once builders of knowledge, lovers of stars. But peace was broken. When fire came from above, a war, not theirs, landed on their land. Enemies came with ships and machines. They did not understand, and her world turned red with fear and ash. She had run then, not for herself, but for the tiny child now asleep in her arms. The child who had not yet learned how cruel the universe could be, the child born during the last days of silence before the skies screamed. The girl's name was Edda. Her skin was softer than moonlight, her eyes glowing like soft blue fire, not like others, not even like her own people. The doctors had said she was different, not sick, not broken, just different, and Lyra knew from the moment she was born that her daughter would either save a world or be feared by one. Lyra had used her knowledge, her codes, her science to steal an escape pod from the science tower that burned in the final attack. She had programmed the course for Earth, the only planet with green life and blue water, the only one where her daughter might grow without chains. They landed in darkness. No one saw them crash, not even the satellites that circled above, hidden by the storm. They arrived in the middle of a forest, and for months, Lyra lived like the trees did, quiet, still moving only when needed. She built a shelter from pieces of the broken pod, learned the human language from stolen signals, learned to cook their food and speak their words. She had no plan, just hope, and every time Ada smiled, that hope grew stronger. Years passed in hiding, and finally they walked into the colony, pretending to be refugees from a ruined planet, and the humans accepted them without knowing the truth, because they looked just human enough and kept to themselves and never asked for more than silence. Lyra worked as a cleaner. Ida went to a small school, her glowing eyes hidden behind cheap sunglasses, her strange powers controlled with soft words and lullabies that Lyra sang every night when she felt the stars moving too fast. But powers are not so easily hidden. Eda had healed a bird once broken wing, twisted in pain, and with a single touch the wing was straight, the feathers clean, and the bird flew again. And a boy had seen her do it and told his father, and the whispers started then like smoke under a locked door. Lyra knew the order would come someday, she just did not expect it so soon. And when the door opened that morning, and the man stood there with the scanner and the weapon, she had felt her legs weaken, her arms shake, but she stood tall because she had to. She stood between the officer and her daughter, ready to fall if it meant Eda could run. But Eda had not run. She had walked forward and said those words that still echoed in Lyra's mind, "Please don't take my mommy." And the man had stopped. He had looked at her like he saw not just a child, but something more. And in that moment, the air had changed. Now in the cave, Lyra looked at Eda, who still slept, her fingers curled around the little toy she never left behind. And Lyra whispered to the stars, "Thank you for one more day." Far above them in the same sky, Captain Ray stood inside his ship holding the toy in his hand, his thoughts heavier than the clouds outside. He had broken a law, not just a rule, but a command that came from the council itself. His name would soon be on their watch list, his face on their screens. He should have felt fear, but he did know, only felt the soft weight of the toy in his hand in the way. The child had looked at him, not with hate, not with fear, but with hope, and he wondered, what kind of world would fear something so small and gentle? He looked out the window and thought of the last war, the one he had fought, and the one that took his daughter from him, a daughter who had never had the chance to grow, never had the chance to ask, "Please don't take my daddy." He pressed a button, and the ship shut down its tracker. He would stay hidden for now. He needed time to think, to decide who he was, if not just a soldier. Down below, the cave was still quiet. Lyra whispered a song to herself, a lullaby from her homeworld, soft and strange like wind through glass, her voice shaking but warm. Ida opened her eyes slowly, smiled, and said, "Are we safe now?" Lyra kissed her forehead and said, "For tonight, Yes, the stars above listened without a word, and somewhere far away, a new order was being written, one that did not care for lullabies or little girls or soft blue light. The wind moved fast across the rocks and trees like it was running from something angry, like it knew danger was coming soon, and deep inside the forest where leaves hid the cave from the sky, Lyra packed their things with shaking hands, her mind racing with questions that had no answers, her ears listening for sounds that did not belong. Ada stood close, holding her toy tightly, the same toy she had dropped at the officer's feet, the one he had picked up, the one she never thought she would see again. Will he come back? She asked, her voice small but calm, and Lyra looked at her with eyes full of love and fear at the same time. Don't know, she whispered, but others will. Someone always comes up above in the orbiting patrol base. Another ship had awakened, and this one was different. It was black and sharp like a blade, and inside it sat a man who smiled only when things were broken. His name was Agent Vos, and he had been watching Ray for a long time. He saw the tracker go dark, saw the last known location, saw the moment Ray hesitated, and Vos knew something was wrong because Ray never hesitated, and hesitation meant weakness, and weakness meant secrets. Took off in silence, not because he had to, but because he liked the hunt below. In the forest, Ray walked alone, his boots dirty, his coat wet from the rain. He still held the toy in his hand, and it felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of every choice he had made in the last 24 hours. He knew Vos would come. It was not a question, just a matter of when and how loud it would be. Ray was not running, but he was not standing still either. He moved like someone who knew every step could be the last safe one he would take. He reached the edge of the colony, saw the lights blinking far away, saw the patrol drones scanning the sky, and he knew they had started looking, not just for Lyra and Ada, but for him too. He had crossed a line, and there was no going back. In the cave, Lyra finished packing what little they had: a blanket, a water filter, some dry food, and the piece of metal from her ship that still hummed when she touched it. Looked at her mother and asked, "Where will we go now?" "Somewhere the stars don't watch," Lyra said softly, "and somewhere no one follows." But she knew such places were rare, like dreams that fade when you wake, and even rarer when someone like Vos was on your trail, far away in the sky. Vos opened a file, a digital case full of notes and names and faces, and he read about Lyra, the alien mother who once built machines that healed planets, who vanished after her world burned, and who now hid with a child who should not exist. He read about Ray, the man who once refused to cry when his daughter died, the man who followed every order until one small voice said, "Please." Vos closed the file and smiled the way wolves smile when they see something small and soft moving and tall. Grass. Ray reached the cave before Vos, but just barely, and when he stepped inside, Lyra turned quickly, her eyes wide, her body ready to fight. "Or Rooney came to warn you," he said. "No weapon, no badge, no lie, just the truth. Hess coming, and he won't stop. He's not like me." Lyra nodded because she already knew. Etta walked to him, slowly looked at the toy in his hand and said, "You kept it." Ray knelt and gave it back and said, "I should have done more, but you did enough," Etta said softly, and for a moment the cave did not feel so small and dark. "We have to leave now," Lyra said. "The night will hide us, and we move until the sky forgets our names." Ray looked at the stars through the crack in the rocks and said, "Then I'll come with you." Lyra stared at him, not sure if she should trust him, not sure if trust was even real anymore, but something in his eyes told her he was not lying, and maybe one broken soldier was better than being alone. They left the cave as the moon rose high above them, the light silver and cold, the forest quiet like it was holding its breath. Behind them, high in the sky, Vos arrived, his ship like a shadow falling fast, his scanners already searching, his fingers tapping like he could already hear the chase begin. He saw footprints fresh and moving away, and his smile grew sharper. He spoke into his calm, "No backup, no delay. I will handle this myself." And then he moved like a knife through the air, fast and quiet and full of purpose. Ray, Lyra, and Etta walked quickly through the trees, each step louder in the dark, each breath a countdown, each heartbeat a drum of warning. And somewhere in the shadows the hunt had begun. The forest was thick with fog, and every branch looked like a hand reaching from the dark. The ground was soft and wet, and the stars above were hidden behind clouds that they too were watching without wanting to be seen. Ray walked ahead, one hand on his belt, the other holding back branches for Lyra and Etta, who followed close behind each step. Careful, each breath measured, like they were walking inside a dream that could break at any second. They had walked all night, and now the cold of morning wrapped around them. But no one stopped, because stopping meant giving the hunter time, and Voss was not the kind of man who lost his prey. Lyra could feel it in the air, the tension, the way the world around her had shifted ever since Ray had returned with that look in his eyes, like he had seen something he never wanted to see again. He had not asked questions, he had not doubted. He had only moved like a man running from a version of himself and toward something he could not name. They found a quiet spot near a broken stream, where the water trickled slowly between stones, and where the trees were too tall for drones to see through. And for a moment, just a small one, they stopped. Ray looked at Etta and saw how tired she was, how her feet trembled with every step, how her hand stayed wrapped around that toy, like it was the last piece of the universe she still trusted. Sat down on a fallen log and reached into his bag, offering her a small food bar and a bottle of water. She took them with a small smile, and for the first time he heard her laugh, just a little light and soft like wind chimes in the rain, and it made him forget the chase for just one heartbeat. But the peace did not last. The ground shook just slightly, a tremor so small only Etta noticed, and when she touched the earth with her palm, her eyes widened like she could hear something deep beneath the soil, whispering secrets only she could understand. Lyra saw her daughter's face change and rushed forward, her voice low and urgent. "What is it?" Etta looked at her mother, then at Ray, her voice even softer than before. "Someone is coming, but not from the sky, from under us, from the machines in the tunnels." Ray stood up fast, his soldier's mind clicking back into place, and reached for the scanner, but it was dead. The signal jammed, the battery full but not responding, and that meant only one thing. "They're here," Lyra said, her voice calm, but her hands shaking. Ray grabbed their bags and pointed east toward the ridge, where old mining tunnels cut through the hills. "We move now, fast, no sound, no lights." They ran through the trees, their shadows long and stretched by the early morning light, the wind behind them growing stronger, like it was trying to push them forward. But just as they reached the edge of the ridge, the sound came, a sharp metal cry from deep below, followed by a light that burned white through the cracks in the rocks. Ray pulled them behind a stone wall built long ago and raised his weapon, but then stopped, because what came out of the ground was not a drone and not Vaz. It was a machine, but not made by humans, not metal like Earth's machines. This one moved like it was alive, like it breathed, and its skin shimmered like liquid, and it did not attack. It only looked at Etta, and then bowed. Ray looked at Lyra and said, "What is that, and why does it bow to her?" Lyra took a slow breath, her eyes fixed on the machine. "It is from our world, from a forgotten time. It is not a hunter, it is a guardian, and it only answers to her." Ray turned to Ida, who now stood in front of them, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, her hair floating slightly as if the wind moved only for her, and the machine responded to her light. She raised one hand slowly, and the machine stepped back, returning to the earth, without sound, without fear. Lyra stepped beside Ray and whispered, "She is not just a child, she is the last carrier of the seed, the last hope for our kind. The ones who built life into machines, the ones who sang to planets and healed stars. She is more than I ever was, more than I ever understood." Ray stared at Etta, not with fear, but with something close to awe, and the silence that followed felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Ida turned back to them, her light fading a little, her voice tired. "We have to move again. He is close. I can feel him now. He's angry, and he's faster than before." Ray nodded and helped Lyra with the bags, his mind full of questions but his heart steady, because now he knew the truth. He was not protecting an alien, he was guarding a miracle, and the hunter was getting closer. The air was no longer quiet, the birds were gone, the trees did not move, and even the wind had forgotten how to breathe. And in the middle of that frozen forest, Ray stood with his back against an old steel door, rusted from years of rain, his hand holding a pulse rifle not aimed at anyone, just ready, just waiting. Edda sat close by, eyes half open, the glow from her skin now soft and fading, her body tired from using the secret that lived inside her, a secret too heavy for any child to carry, and yet she carried it with silence and without asking for pity. Lyra stood over her, hands on the girl's shoulders, humming something low and ancient, a sound that felt like a shield made of song, one that only mothers from her world remembered. And Ray listened, though he did not understand the words, because somehow it made the fear in his chest grow smaller. They had found an old maintenance shelter near the edge of the tunnels, one not listed on any human map, left behind by miners who vanished years ago, and Ray had led them there because the machines could not track inside, because the walls were made with old tech that blocked every signal. But nothing truly stays hidden forever. Far above them, behind a screen of clouds, Vos circled in his ship, eyes locked on the region below, fingers tapping without sound, and a grin spreading across his face, because he had received something better than a signal, something faster than a drone, something that no one expected. Betrayal. Ray's former teammate, Officer Bren, had sent the location not through systems, not through code, but with an old human trick, a burner frequency short and fast enough to slip past all patrol checks. And Vos smiled as the words lit his screen like fire. Target found below in the shelter. Ray leaned against the door, eyes heavy, but never closing, ears trained for any sound that did not belong. And then he heard it, a click behind him, not from the forest but from the side hallway inside the shelter, and it was not Lyra, and not Edda. Ray turned slowly, rifle rising, breath locked. And then he saw him, Bren, wearing the old black jacket of their squad, his face the same but older, his hands up, but his eyes cold and hard, like a man who had decided truth was too dangerous to carry anymore. Ray asked, "How did you find us?" And Bren said, "I never stopped watching your steps. You always thought you were careful, but I know you better than you know yourself." Ray kept the rifle steady and said, "You gave me your word when I left the station. You said you'd cover me." Bren smiled, not with joy but with regret, and said, "I did for a while, but you brought a storm with you, and I have a family too, and I will not lose them for something, not even human." Lyra stepped in between them, her arms open, her voice calm. "We do not want to hurt anyone. Just leave us be. Let us go where the stars forget our names." Bren looked at her, looked at the girl who was now standing again, her eyes bright again, and he said, "That child is not supposed to exist, and if she does, then everything we built, every rule, every order becomes nothing." Ada stepped forward, walked slowly to Bren and looked into his eyes, and her voice was soft but deep like the roots of a mountain. She said, "I am not nothing, and I never asked to be more than I am." And for a moment, just a comma, small one. Bren hesitated, because something in her voice reached a place in him that he had buried long ago, something that sounded like his own daughter once did before she was taken by the fire of the last war. But the moment passed. He raised his hand to signal Vos, the device already blinking in his palm. But Ray moved faster, not with hate, but with something like sorrow, and he knocked it from Bren's hand and grabbed him, pulled him to the ground, and said, "I'm sorry, but I cannot let you take her." They tied him gently, not with cruelty, but with necessity, and left him in the corner as the shelter lights dimmed and the distant sound of engines broke through the silence of the trees. Vos was coming. Ray looked at Edda and said, "Are you ready?" And she nodded, though her eyes showed the fear. She did not speak. "Then we move," Ray said, "and this time we don't run to hide, we run to finish this." Lyra packed what little they had left and touched Bren's shoulder once before leaving, not with anger but with quiet sadness, because even betrayal hurts less when you understand the fear behind it. They stepped into the early light, not bright, not warm, just enough to see the path ahead, and behind them the shelter faded into the trees and the dust. And high above, Vos smiled again, because now he knew they were afraid, and fear makes people slower, makes their steps heavier, and soon he would be close enough to take everything. But what he did not know was that something inside Edda had changed, and it was waiting to wake again. The ground felt harder with every step, and the sky above looked like it had forgotten how to shine. The clouds moved like soldiers, following orders, and the cold wind screamed without words through the broken trees as Ray led them through the last edge of the forest toward the old relay tower near the cliff. It was not just a tower, it was a choice. Lyra walked close, her fingers tight around Edda's hand, her face calm, but her eyes storming with memories of places they would never return to, her mind repeating questions without answers, and her heart counting every second like it might be the last one they would share. Edda said nothing, her voice lost in the weight of what she knew. Her feet light but firm, her glow dimmed but not gone, and inside her something was growing, something waking, something that did not belong to just one world anymore. Ray stopped near the broken fence and looked up at the tower, his breath slow, his hands open. He knew what it was. He had been here once during training when the war still burned in his blood, and he remembered how the tower had the power to call anything from orbit to surface, to space to death. If Voss got there first, it was over. They entered the lower gate through rusted panels and dark corridors, old wires hanging like vines, old screens blinking with tired lights, and Ray found the terminal in the center of the room, still alive, still waiting, still listening. He looked at Lyra and said, "This is the place, this is where we decide what kind of story this becomes." But before she could answer, the wall behind them shattered, and the sound was not a scream, not an explosion. It was the kind of sound that silence makes when it dies. Voss stepped through the dust with no armor, no mask, only the smile of a man who believes in nothing except the mission, and his boots crushed the broken pieces of wall like promises never kept. Raised his weapon but did not fire. He looked at Ray and said, "You could have been a legend, but now you are just another traitor hiding behind things you do not understand." Ray did not raise his gun. He raised his voice and said, "She is not a thing, she is a child." Voss laughed, not loud, not wild, just sharp like ice falling from the edge of a blade, and said, "She is a risk, and risks get erased." Lyra stepped forward and said, "If you kill her, you kill what is left of my people, and maybe your own." Voss turned to her slowly, his eyes cold as deep space, and said, "I do not care about people. I care about control, and survival, and control begins with one simple rule. Obey." Ray stepped between them, and Voss said, "Move or die." Ray looked at Edda, and then back at the man he once called commander, and said, "I have already died once, the day I followed orders that made me bury my own daughter, and I will not do it again." For a moment no one moved, and then Edda stepped forward. Her glow returned, not bright, not loud, but steady like the heart of a star before it explodes. And the air around her shifted like time had forgotten how to move, and even Voss stepped back without knowing why. She looked at him, and her voice was not angry and not afraid. She said, "You can end me, but you cannot stop what I carry, and you cannot break what you never understood." Voss raised the gun, but it shook in his hand. Ray fired first, not to kill, but to disarm, and the weapon flew across the floor as Voss fell to one knee, blood on his shoulder, and rage in his voice. He looked up and said, "She is not special, she is a lie, and she will destroy everything." Ray walked to him and said, "Maybe she will, or maybe she will save us, but the choice is hers, not yours." He turned to the terminal and pressed the emergency override sequence. The system blinked alive, asking for destination, asking for signal, asking for a name. He looked at Edda and asked, "What now?" She walked to the console, placed her small hand on the panel, and closed her eyes, and the tower began to glow from within, as if her light had become its blood, and her thoughts its mind. She sent a signal, not of war, but of memory, a message written in light and sound and truth, a voice that said, "We are still here, and we remember." Lyra watched with tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of something older and deeper, something like pride, and something like goodbye. Ray looked at Voss, who now sat silent on the floor, not defeated, not broken, just empty, like a man who had lost the war he never understood. Outside, the clouds parted, just a little, and the stars blinked once, and far away beyond all charts, something answered the call. Edda opened her eyes and said they heard. Mary asked, "Who are they?" Edda smiled gently and said, "The ones who still believe in life." And then the tower went Quiet. The stars above were not the same anymore. They looked closer, warmer, softer, like they had been watching this story unfold. And now they were ready to breathe again, and below them on the silent cliff, where the tower still hummed with ancient light, 3 figures stood together, not as fugitives, not as enemies, just as people. Ray looked across the valley where the forest had begun to bloom again, not with flowers, not yet, but with peace, small and gentle like the first breath after pain. His hands rested on his belt, not for a fight, but because he did not know where to place them when they were no longer holding a weapon. Lyra stood beside him, her face quiet, her eyes strong, her heart slowly learning how to beat without fear. She had not spoken much since the signal was sent, not because she had nothing to say, but because some things are better felt than spoken, and in that silence she carried the songs of a home that no longer existed. Ada sat on the ground, her fingers drawing circles in the dirt, her glow now soft as candlelight, not because she was hiding it, but because she no longer had to. Her light was part of the world. Now not a threat, not a question, just a truth. The sun rose without noise, climbing slow across the sky like it had waited a long time for this moment, and its light touched every broken tree, every empty machine, every forgotten corner where shadows once lived, and it said one word without voice. Begin. Ray walked to the edge of the cliff, his eyes scanning the sky, his breath calm, and when he looked down at the world he once served, he did not feel anger or regret. He only felt distance, like he had stepped away from a version of himself, and now stood in something new. Behind him the old patrol ship still rested, half broken, but alive enough to fly if needed, and inside it, Voss remained quiet, wrapped in bandages, not chains. His face turned toward the wall, not out of shame, but because he no longer had anything to fight for. His war had ended, but his story had not. Lyra visited him once before they left, offered him water and a message from Etta. Just 3 words, not angry, not soft, just true. I forgive you. Voss said nothing, but took the bottle with both hands and nodded just once. They left the tower that same morning, no ships chasing, no alarms, no orders, just silence and sky, and something that felt like beginning. And for days, they traveled across places no one remembered, over rivers, under stars, through villages that asked no questions and offered no harm. And one day when the trees grew shorter and the hills turned wide, Etta stopped and pointed forward, her voice clear. This is the place. Ray looked at the land ahead, a hidden valley surrounded by cliffs, open sky above, clean water below, and fields waiting for life. And he knew she was right. They built not with machines, but with hands and kindness, piece by piece, shelter by shelter. A home grew from the earth, and other voices began to join them, people who had also run, people who had also lost, people who also wanted one more chance. And in time the valley became more than a hiding place. It became a beginning, a place where old wounds healed, and new songs were sung, and laughter returned. Not loud, not wild, but real. Lita grew not fast, not slow, just enough. And with each season her powers became gentler, not weaker, and her heart became louder, not heavier. And people followed her, not because she asked, but because they believed in the way she listened. Ray stayed always near, never leading, never hiding, just watching, guiding, teaching, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. And when someone asked who he was, he would smile and say, just a man who chose a different path. Lyra grew older, with grace, her hands always busy, her voice always calm. And when she stood beside her daughter during the first harvest, she said, this is what we came for, not survival, not escape. But this years passed like pages in a book written slowly by firelight. And the valley became a place of story, a place where names meant something and light did not have to hide. And then one night, as the stars blinked in rhythm, a ship landed on the far side of the hill. Not a hunter, not a soldier, not a warning, just a message carrier, silent and curious, with a symbol on its side. Not from Earth, not from war. A new mark made of 2 lights joined. Ada walked to it alone, her hands open, her heart steady. And when the hatch opened, a voice said, your signal reached us. We heard the truth. We are ready to begin again. She nodded once and said, then you are welcome. Ray stood behind her, not afraid, not worried, just proud and tired and full of peace. And Lyra watched from the garden where new flowers now grew blue and silver and strong like the past had been planted and bloomed again in that valley under those stars. Where once a choice had broken a world, now a child had built a new one. This was only the beginning.